About 200 years ago, our nation's founding fathers wrote the Constitution, a document that represents the ideal of America: freedom, justice, and the basic rights of the people.
There are debates about the Constitution today, but no debates can come as close as what put slavery in the Constitution. The creation of the Constitution was not as well-rounded as some might think. People argued about what should be included or excluded from our founding document.
One major point argued at the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3, also later known as the Three-Fifths Compromise.
But to understand the Three-Fifths Compromise, we have to rewind time back to when slavery was introduced into the American colonies, when America was still known as the English colonies, and where slavery at first wasn't prominent in the region.
Of course, some wealthy landowners had other people work for them, like indentured servants, but it could have been any man of any color. Later on, a trade system had been developed called triangle trading.
This method allowed Europe to get African people from the western coast of Africa and shipped into their colonies for more labor, while the colonies provided them with taxes and goods from that labor.
This entire trading strategy led to people from Africa to be shipped to English colonies, and then the colonists put them to work in various tedious tasks, and thus creating slavery.
Now fast forward to the Constitutional Convention. The southern part of now America has more slaves and in effect more population, while the northern states has less slaves and the lower general population.
Back then, under the Articles of Confederation, Congress was exceptionally weaker, and the President of the assembled Congress was not as we know it today.
Under the Constitution, the government would consist of three branches: the judicial branch, the highest court in the country, also known as the Supreme Court, the executive branch, which houses the President, and the legislative branch, which consists of Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate.
Congress would be the most powerful of all branches under this Constitution because they would have the most responsibilities.
The Constitution was divided into 7 articles, the first about Congress. It describes Congress as a bicameral body, with the House of Representatives based on population of states, while the Senate gave 2 votes to each state, no matter the population.
During the debate over the Constitution, the southern states, knowing the Senate couldn't give them the advantage they craved, they wanted for their slaves to be counted as a part of the population, which will give them more votes in the House, theoretically granting them more influence in the government.
What's backwards about their thinking is that slaves were only humans when needed for gaining more power, but as property otherwise.
The North, however, wanted to not count slaves as population because the southern states would get more power, and so that was the dilemma of the Constitutional Convention at the time.
The main delegates involved in the creation of the compromise were Roger Sherman, a delegate from Connecticut, and James Wilson, a North Carolina delegate.
They both knew they could not pass a constitution until a resolution was made, so thus the Three-Fifths Compromise came into existence.
The Three-Fifths Compromise stated, "Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this Union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons."
They decided, with the help of other delegates, the best course of action was, when counting up the population, to mark each slave as 3/5 of a free person, hence the 3/5 of all other persons.
This compromise had a major impact for the ratification of the Constitution, giving us the government, rules, and values that we have today as free American people.
This could not be changed because of another piece of the Constitution, stating that Congress could only pass legislation on slavery until after 1800.
The 13th Amendment, passed later in 1868, ruled slavery illegal, and rendering both of these pieces of the Constitution inactive. This was good because it got rid of a truly insulting piece of our history.
Without the Three-Fifths Compromise, the Constitution would never have been passed. However, if we look back, this is something we should not have been proud of, as it was debating whether a slave was counted as a person or just mere property.
This topic can be easily made into a historical footnote, but it had significant impact on creating our Constitution.
The Three-Fifths Compromise ties into the NHD theme, conflict and compromise, in two ways. The first is the conflict. The conflict was how the northern and southern colonies disagreed on whether a slave should be counted as property or a person. This argument gets down to our core as moral human beings and our personal freedoms as Americans.
The second half of the theme is compromise. The Founding Fathers compromised after lots of arguments and points were brought up that a slave should be counted as 3/5 of a person. This was done to stop infighting to reach a common, ultimate goal, to create a stable American government. It goes to prove the point made by Edmund Burke, ironically a member of Parliament and not a Founding Father. All government, indeed every human benefit and enjoyment, every virtue and every prudent act, is founded on compromise.